Right, I'm here with Peter Humphreys, running for candidate in the 2019 elections in Hamilton East.
Yep.
So I've got to remember that it's Hamilton East because I'm starting to get them a bit mixed up now.
Yeah.
So many on both sides.
I know. I think it's 39 in total, and excluding the mayoral ones.
And it would have been easier if I'd done them in some sort of order, like Hamilton East first, then Hamilton West. But it's been all over the place.
But it's been nice to get a mix of views.
And the debates have been interesting.
They have been.
But as much as I can probably almost answer this question myself, I do need to ask you, why should people vote for you?
I bring a different perspective to council. I'm a social worker. I've been involved in social work. I'm a qualified social worker. I have a Bachelor of Social Science in social work. And cities are about people, and that's what I'm saying. If you have a social worker at the table, I'll have an understanding of social issues. I'll have the science behind those issues. And when we do make decisions about the city, I'll be able to actually come from that perspective. We've often had business people running the council, lawyers, PR, journalists, and what's named never really truly social workers. And that's what cities need.
So do you think because of that, the social issues in our city haven't, although they've been addressed to some degree, they haven't been addressed as good as they could have been?
Absolutely. We've been quite punitive with some social issues, so that's what it turns out to be, if you come from that. But if you come from a social justice, a social work perspective, you have a different view on it, You want what's best for that person as well, not just what's best for the community or the business community. You want what's best for that person maybe who's sitting on the street begging, It's that sort of change in thinking that social workers do.
And also, I'm making an assumption here, but I would assume that you would better understand the importance of the fluffy stuff in society, the parks, the recreational facilities. That there are people of low incomes in this city, and sometimes the only form of entertainment they can take their kids to is going to the park or going to their gardens or something like that. They can't afford to do anything more than pack up a few sandwiches and go to the park.
And that's what's really important for me, that we have really good playgrounds in the communities, not just destination playgrounds. It's about having really good communities so families can actually walk to them, So, it's definitely about that, the infrastructure as well. Social work crosses over most boundaries, around social issues, around infrastructure issues for people. We're about communities, and we're about developing communities, keeping communities together, and making sure that we look after everybody in society, from the elderly to the vulnerable on the streets, it's sort of quite a unique science, really, but it's quite often across the board, really, especially when you're running a city.
Yeah. And if you cause people to be happy through the things like activities happening in the city, how you interact, how you treat people, how you deal with people that are in need, but also how you deal with people who are not in need, who need entertainment in the city, because we are more than just a place to live and do business. We are a place to socialise.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen recently some good moves, for the disability community, where they can use the buses free during the day. The students can use the buses free during the day, and the youth can use it at certain times of the day. But why didn't we think about anybody with a community service card could use a bus during the day? The bus is often empty around town. What that does, as a social worker, I look at the bigger picture and I see, we've got a lot of transitional families now who are moving accommodation because it gets too expensive, or they get kicked out, so they move across town. To get back to engage with that community, they have to drive, or they have to manage to pay for the bus fare. They can do that by getting on the bus and going. The kids can go see their friends. And the other aspect of that is, often people in low socioeconomic situations, not stereotypically put them in the position now, but what I'm saying is they've often got cars that don't have registrations, don't have warrants of fitness, and it's the easy option is to jump in the car, take the whole family and drive across town. If they had the bus option, it would stop people from actually going before the justice system. It would stop them from going before the courts, because they get the fine for the warrant. So a social worker's ideology is different. A business person, it's about entrepreneurialness, and it's about all that stuff in town. But for me, it's the other stuff. It's about that, just that simple solution of coming up with a community service card option for buses. Get on the bus. That changes communities. That retains structure of communities. Yeah, and it keeps people out of the justice system.
So you're looking at a concept of not parking the ambulance at the bottom of the hill, having avoidance options to avoid problems before they occur, because I think that covers the whole of New Zealand for that matter. There are a lot of areas where we can do things, like council could assist a lot of groups in Hamilton to do their activities better and more cost effectively, to provide help to people before they get to a given stage. There's all sorts of things. Youth crime is the obvious one that comes to mind. That you can cut that off at the roadhead by doing things, putting things in place that avoid these kids going down a path of petty crime, which often then develops into bigger crime. You start the process of stopping that early on, and you end up redirecting them into a different direction.
Yeah, and the thing that council can do there, the way they can be involved in that, like they have been for many years, is funding the community houses. Those community houses over in the Western community, over Hamilton East, over in Bader Street, they're the ones that nip things in the bud. They get youth involved in different things. When there's a family breakdown, they get involved in that. When there's a budgeting issue, so the council needs to be funding those things, and those are the things that stop people coming into night shelters, or becoming homeless, or becoming, the family structure breaking down. So for me, council can be involved in that, and actually it doesn't cost that much at that end, and eventually it saves a hell of a lot of money for health, for police, for the courts and everything, by us being involved in that area.
We had a discussion the other day about pretty much this topic relating to foster care.
Yeah.
That a large percentage of people living in on the streets and in night shelters and things like this, and involved in crime and sitting in our prisons, come from a foster care environment. And a lot of people that go into foster care because there are problems in that family that could have been prevented if they were detected and dealt with early on, and those families were included in the community, and people took care to assist them in some way.
We know
something as simple as helping them fund a fridge so that they can have decent food in the household, and things like this.
We know early intervention works. We know it saves a hell of a lot of money in the long term, especially around children getting involved early. We know that. So that's just common sense, It's where council's role is in that, So we need to be communicating really well with Wellington, with the central government. So we have for instance, a good understanding around what social housing we need in Hamilton, so the Housing New Zealand has that good understanding. We need to know what's going on in the city around the welfare of our children. The council needs to know that. So if we need to have intervention, it should come from central government. Council's not going to be able to do this, but we are a voice to be able to actually sort of seek that help for our community, and we've got a really good community team here in Hamilton, run by council. They go to all the different meetings around, the monthly meetings, around the weekly almost. They go to all those meetings and they know what's going on in the community. They can feed that back into the councillors, and the councillors can then lobby central government. We're not, the ratepayers in Rototuna, Flagstaff or Fairfield aren't going to be able to solve all the social issues for Hamilton, but what we are going to be able to do is have a voice on council that talks to Wellington continuously and says, this is what we need. These are the issues in our city, the fourth largest city in New Zealand, and this is what we need to do. We need your assistance, financial assistance often, but we also need the intervention, and so,
And again, I think this comes down to that looking forward. I've asked a few candidates, what do you think Hamilton will look like in 30 years, or what would you like it to look like? But here we're talking about something where it's a case of, what do you want Hamilton to look like when certain youth get aged by 10 years. So you've got young people or people at a given stage now. Where do you want that to go in say 10 years' time?
Yeah.
Do you want to do something now that makes them a better part of the community and involved in the community, or do you want to do nothing and let them become a problem and crime go up in areas and things like this? And
this is what we do. We don't even do infrastructure planning very well. We've seen that with the different buildings around town. And we don't do social planning very well, social issue planning very well. Again, I come back to it. That's why you have a social worker on the council. When the Age Concern place was started, that was started by a social worker. The Hamilton Christian Night Shelter was started by a social worker. The school walking train was started by a social worker. All those things, it's about community development.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm saying. We've developed the community from council. We have the workers there. We're paying people to do that. So let's just do it and have a coal-face perspective.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope to bring to council.
The other night, yesterday afternoon, I'm losing track of the debates, you brought up the social housing that council sold off.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't realise until I started doing these interviews is the housing that was sold off is not committed to stay as social housing after 10 years. So after 10 years, they could sell it off or just use it as standard flats. They don't have to keep it as social housing.
So what happened was it sold for 23.5 million or whatever, and some of the money was paid up front, and then 19.8 million was paid March this year. So that was in 2014. 15, the first payment was put down, and the 10-year cycle started from then. So 10 years. So we've already lost those years now. But the only thing, accessible property will have an obligation to continue providing social housing. Not a legal obligation, they'll have a moral obligation. Yeah. That's the only thing. I would have liked that money, the 19, not to be taken, not to be kept with accessible properties, so they could purchase more properties with that money, more social properties, So then, if they'd have kept that, and then you could have had a councillor on their trust board, so the city still has a say, So that's what I would have liked to see. And I would have liked that money to stay. That money came in the 60s from the ratepayers to provide safety net for our elderly. A lot of our elderly are suffering now. I was talking to a friend of mine, Dell and Bob. She was a cleaner, he was a painter, and they bought their own house, they paid it off, they retired, and they're getting on a bit in years now, and their rates is 10 weeks of their superannuation, so it's 3,500 or whatever, so it's 10 weeks of their superannuation, so that's gone, so now they can't actually afford to live in the house because of the rates, the insurance and everything, and their income is only $700 and whatever dollars from their superannuation, so they don't have enough. So they've decided they're going to sell it, and they've got a place to rent. And Dell said to me, it's actually going to cost us $85,000 over the next 5 years. So if we live that long, at least we'll be able to live properly with the rest of the money, from the sale of the house, So why are people having to do this,
That's not good.
And there's stories like that out. It's not a nice place to be when you come to your retirement and your rates are going to cost. But we know that the city is growing, so the rates aren't going to go down. We've had an average, like the rates for the last 6-7 years have been around 3.8, 3.9, with two anomalies in 2015 rather. We had the garden contribution, and then last year we had the rates at 9.7. But they're going to continue around the 3.8. We're growing city.
Well, we hope, we know that we know the next ones are going to be no more than 3.8.
Yeah.
And some candidates have mentioned that they would be endeavouring to bring it below that. But we know that potentially there will be another large one at some point in the future, because that will happen at the way things are going.
Possibly. We've got the infrastructure fund coming in for the Peacocks thing, so hopefully that alleviates some of that stuff around the infrastructure, the bridge and all the sewerage and all the other stuff that we have to put in there. But nobody can honestly say, that's one of the other things. As a social worker, I have a code of ethics I have to adhere to. If I stand up in a meeting and somebody says to me, how are you going to bring down the rates? I'm going to honestly say to them, I can't. It's impossible. We've had business people, we've had accountants, PricewaterhouseCoopers accountants in council, and all kinds of people that have been successful. They've never been able to bring it down. And honestly, I can say it's not going to come down. We're not going to be able to. We've got a growing city, like I said.
Yeah.
A busload of people every week come into the city. That's 40 people every week that come into the. How does the infrastructure? How do you do that without adding more money or keeping it at around the 3.8 mark? You know, so it's going to be a challenge for the city, and we can just everybody can say we bring down the rates. We've seen a lot of people elected onto council on the rates ticket, you know. But if you look and have a look over the years, it's never changed. It doesn't matter, you know. And we've got to be honest with the people. This is how much it costs to run the city. We can do away with luxury items like the theatre. I'm totally against it. I'm totally against the cost that's going to come out of. I'd rather give Bob and Dell a rates remission than build a theatre, you know. We've got really good theatres in Hamilton. Many of our kids walk Rivoli Theatre, walk the boards at Rivoli Theatre. We've got the Cordons there sitting empty a lot of the time. For me, I look at the Meteor, how that's grown since it was taken over by the trust, you know. Isn't that been fantastic? You know?
You've got a bunch of enthusiastic artists and artsy types that have really gone with that and taken it places.
And to me, that's community development. You know, it's coming from a thespian and artistic bent, but it's community development. And those things local solutions will come from the community, you know. As long as council is there as a vehicle to add that, you know, to be there to facilitate that, then we can be doing a really brilliant job, you know, from council.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, thanks very much for your time. Is there anything else that, apart from what we've just discussed, that you would see as a major thing that if you got onto council that you would seriously be taking a look at as soon as possible? That you think's just as important?
It's funny, I never quote Margaret Thatcher, Roger Douglas or Ronald Reagan, but I will quote Ronald Reagan. He always used to do this joke about the Russians. He always used to say, this guy goes into a ladder dealership and he orders a ladder, and the salesperson says, we deliver it in 10 years' time. And the customer says, morning or afternoon? And the dealer goes, why? He says, I've got the plumber coming in the morning. That's what our infrastructure development has been like. We've seen the municipal pools collapse, basically. We've seen Tarapa pools get run down. We've seen the Founders Theatre sitting there empty. We've seen the library closed for a year. We need to be doing long-term planning, you know? And quite often we don't do these planning very well because people sit on council for a very long time. We need people that are coming in. We need to actually... Jack says some crazy things, you know, but one of the things he says, you know, people have been too long on council, you know. We need a sort of a statutory time that you can be on council. You can be on there for 2 lots of 3 years, maybe. I was on the COGS committee distributing funds for Hamilton, you know, and I was on there for 2 lots of 3 years, and I had to come off, and I was quite happy. I'm on the community Waikato committee. We can stay there for 2 lots of 3 years, you know. Okay. You're going to do your best, and you're going to be doing succession planning as we go along. And when we do that succession planning, part of it is around planning the infrastructure, what needs to be maintained, and all that kind of stuff. But if you're sitting there too long, it's not healthy for the council. So I think let's be looking at that stuff, you know, and let's people that are on council have a look at themselves, put their hands up if they think they've been there too long, you know, and just and give like. I see Sarah Thompson from the other side of town. She would actually be a brilliant councillor. She's got no chance of getting in, you know. So people like that, we need to encourage people like that to be on council.
Yeah, just look at the change that happened last term when there was a bunch of councillors actually retired, and there was a bunch of new blood coming. When my mother did 2 terms on council, she literally did 2 terms because she had accomplished the core things that she wanted to do. She didn't want to be in there till forever. She wanted to accomplish a set goal. She got that, and there were still things that needed work on, but she felt that she got things moving in the right direction far enough that she could then step out of council and carry on making waves from outside council. She didn't need to be a councillor from that. All she needed to do was get things moving in the direction they needed to, and then step away from it.
And that's what succession is all about. That's how the city grows. You get new ideas coming in. We need young ideas, you know. We've got a disengagement from the voting population, especially the young ones, you know. The candidates know where to go at election time. They go to the old people's homes, you know, because they know they'll get the tick, you know.
Yeah.
So the reality of it is we need to get the young people voting, you know. So, and that's some of the ways we do that is by rejuvenating council, by getting some young people on there and changing the councillors, you know.
Do you think also that when we're talking about infrastructure and you know, public participation, do you think also that council can go a long way to encouraging the bigger businesses in the city to participate in various activity, you know, various things, funding of various things a lot more than they possibly. I know there is a lot of big businesses that do fund quite a bit in this city. But do you think there's still room for council to encourage them a bit more?
There is a philanthropic movement here. There's quite a strong one, you know, and it's often they're not there in your face saying that we're assisting. For instance, the night shelter, you know, when I was running that, the philanthropic community came to our aid, you know, when we went to purchase a new men's shelter. So there is a strong philanthropic community here in Hamilton, and let's get them to do what they do best, do business, create jobs and keep the city active, you know. That's what we want them to do, you know. We've got some really good NGOs here and some really people in the community that want to move, go eco, you know. Fantastic concepts going on there around the Kaivolution, around the shop that's open, you just help yourself. We've got some fantastic things going on in that community space. But what let's business do what they need to do to create jobs, keep the economy of the city going, make it a place that you can do business really well. And that's how we've got to sometimes separate the social stuff, the economic issues, but there can be support, you know, but I think they do pretty well.
So do you think one of council's big jobs is to enable these organisations
and that's the most,
be the glue in the joint that brings multiple different groups together to accomplish effectively the same goal that they all want anyway? They're just not always connected.
And that's it, Lindsay, the word enable, the enabler. That's what council should be. But they need to be informed to do that, you know. They need to have some understanding of the social issues. They need to have an understanding of the business issues, the legal issues. And this is why you need everybody around that table, you know. It's a complementary thing. It's a team, you know. I was on the night shelter team for 11 years, you know. I was a firefighter for 7 years, you know. I was on a team.
There's a good example of a team. You can't do that by yourself.
And that's the whole thing. Even though I was the station officer, I was still a member of the team, you know. Council is a team. It's who you have on that team that will inform and develop the city and be the enabler for the city to produce what it needs to produce, for people to live here comfortably, for people to do business here, you know, and for people to feel safe here.
Oh, well, thanks very much for your time.
Pleasure.
And good luck in the election, and good luck towards attempting to become one of the council enablers.
And don't order a ladder from that dealer.
Thanks.